In this video, we're going to show you how to replace a valve cover gasket set on your Honda Pilot. Let's get started. Using a 10mm wrench, loosen the negative terminal and remove the negative battery cable. Tuck this down to the side. Remove the plastic engine cover. Using a flat blade screwdriver, we're going to loosen the clamp. Pull the hose assembly out of the intake. Using a 10mm socket, loosen the clamp. Using an 8mm socket, remove the 4 bolts for the air box. Moving to the back side of the box, there will be 2 more. With all 4 bolts loose, we're going to lift up and remove the intake, pull it off of the throttle body. Using a 12mm socket, we're going to remove the 2 nuts and 2 bolts for the throttle body. We're going to pull the throttle body off the intake. There's a push button connector. Push on this top button and pull it off. On the bottom, there's a clamp. Pinch this clamp. Slide it down and then pull the hose off. And we'll leave this with the intake. Pinch the clamp, slide it back. Pull the hose off of the intake. I'm going to tuck it up behind here, out of the way. Remove the connector off the side of the intake. There's a push button on the bottom. Push on that button, remove the connector. Pinch the clamp, pull it down. Remove the hose. We're going to leave this on the valve cover. Using a 10mm socket, we're going to go around and remove all of the bolts off of this top cover. All of the bolts are the same size, so you don't need to worry about where they went. We're going to go around our cover using a flat blade screwdriver, and there's these little ears around the outside. Our cover is RTV'd down, so we're going to go around and break the sealer all the way around the cover. You want to do this very gently. You don't want to crack the cover or damage any sealing surfaces. Remove the cover. Remove the gasket. We're only going to remove the 12mm nuts and bolts. Get them all loosened with a ratchet before using a power tool. Remove all of the nuts and bolts. Lift straight up and remove the intake manifold. Remove the intake gasket. Remove the spacer and remove the bottom gasket. Using clean rags, we're going to plug all of the holes that are leading down into the engine. This is so while we're working, we don't drop anything down there, and also while we're cleaning, we don't drop any crud down there. Using a light abrasive on a piece of wood, we'll use this sanding block to sand down the top of this and get rid of any of this black stuff, any corrosion. We don't want to take away any of the metal, just the extras. While you're sanding, you always want to push the dirt away from these cavities. Do not scrape into them. We're going to take our spacer and we're going to clean both sides using our sanding block. When you're done cleaning, it should look something like this. Remove all of the rags. We'll clean up this area just a tad more, and then we'll be ready to put our gasket in. Before assembling everything, we'll use a clean rag and some parts cleaner. We're going to wipe down all of our mating surfaces. We're going to do this on the spacer as well. Install the gasket. Install the spacer. Install the second gasket. We're going to remove the connectors for all of our coil plugs. There's a push button. Push on that and remove the connector. Be careful, these clips can be brittle and they might break on you. We're going to do the same thing on the back side. Using a 6mm hex bit, we're going to remove the bolts for the coil packs. Remove the bolts. Using a 10mm socket, remove the bolt for this bracket. Slide the bracket out of the way. Remove the coils. Do the same thing on the other side. We're going to cover all of these holes. You can use rags or you can use a piece of cardboard. I'm going to use cardboard, and we're just going to put it over the two studs, and right on top of the two studs, push down. Using a trim tool, we're going to pop this plastic stay off of the bracket. We're going to remove two connectors. There's a push button. Push on that, and then we're going to push down on the lower half. Remove that connector. On the bottom side of that bracket, the way this attaches to it is there's this little push tab right here. I reached around down on bottom, pulled this tab, and was able to remove the connector assembly. Push on the push button and remove the connector. Make sure you don't lose that plastic insert. Remove the two 10mm bolts on top of the valve cover for the harnesses. Take your harness and flop it over to the side. Remove the dipstick. Go around the valve cover and remove the 5 10mm bolts. Remove the bolts. Using a small pry tool or a plastic trim tool, we're going to go around and pick up around the sides of the valve cover and just kind of break the tension on that gasket and the mating surface. Just going to do the same thing on the other side. Just get in between that seam, kind of pop up. Once you feel everything's mostly separated, pull straight up and remove the valve cover. I'm going to cover this area with a clean rag. This will help while we're cleaning to not get anything inside of here. Keep any dust out, keep any large chunks out. You can put a few of them in here, move this one around as you go. When you have it nice and covered, go around with a light abrasive or a razor blade, and we're going to go around and we're going to scrape all of the extras off of this mating surface. Just go around and make it all nice and shiny like this. If you're using a razor blade, be very careful not to gouge the metal. Remove the gasket from the valve cover. Just pull it out of the channel. Using a seal remover or a flat blade screwdriver, we're going to remove the tube seals. Remove the seal and do the same for the other two. Using brake parts cleaner and a rag, we're going to clean up inside of this cover. If you'd like to, you can also clean the outside. It's not necessary, but you can do it. With our cover nice and clean, we're going to install the gasket. Install the gasket into the groove. Make sure that this tab, the flat side, is up. We're going to install the seals into the valve cover. I'm going to use a 1 3/16 socket. This for me fits perfectly right around. Use that and a soft face hammer. Get the seal started nice and square and then tap it in. Make sure the seal is sitting nice and flush and square, and then repeat the process for the other two seals. With our valve cover gasket and our tube seals installed, we're ready to install the cover. We're going to install new washers around our bolts. Pull the metal cap off and push this rubber part off of the bolt. Mine are very hard and I'm struggling to push it off of the bolt, so I'm just going to use a pair of snips and snip the side of this and pull it off. Before I put anything new on here, I'm just going to take 2 seconds and clean the bolt off using a clean rag and some parts cleaner. Grab the new washer. And install it onto the bolt. Do the same process for all 5 bolts. Install the bolts into the valve cover. Get all of these started by hand. We're going to go around and snug all of our bolts down. We're going to torque this valve cover in 3 steps. Step number 1 is done. That was tightening down all of the bolts. Step number 2, we're going to go to about 6 foot-pounds. On the final step, we're going to hit 8.8 foot-pounds, which is going to be our final torque. If you removed your oil cap while cleaning, you can reinstall that now. I also removed the vacuum hose while cleaning, so we'll slap this back on. Return the clamp to its original position. Install the coil packs. Install the bolts for the coil packs. Snug the bolts down. Flop the engine harness down. Get the 10mm bolt started. Snug the bolts down. Install the connectors for the coil packs. Pull the O2 sensor harness over and install it to our engine harness. Push until you hear a click. If you don't hear a click, give it a pull. Make sure they're really connected. We're going to install this plastic connector onto this bracket. Line it up, push it on. You'll feel it click on. Then install the other O2 sensor. Push. Hear a click, give it a pull, make sure it's connected. Install the plastic stay into the bracket. Grab the ground strap bracket, pull it back over. Line the bracket up and install the bolt. Snug the bolt down. Install the dipstick. We're going to remove the hose off of the rear valve cover. Pinch the clamp. We're going to remove the hose. Pull the hose down. Remove the hose off the valve cover. Using a 10mm socket, remove the bolt for the engine harness. Remove the second 10mm bolt for the engine harness. Remove the 10mm bolt for the power steering bracket. Remove the connectors for the injectors. There's a push button on either side. Push that and then pull up. There's a plastic stay on that rail. Using a trim tool, we're going to pop that clip out of the bracket. We're going to remove this plastic stay off of the bracket. There's a little tab on top. Push that towards the back of the car and then lift up. pop it off the bracket. We're going to remove the 2 electrical connectors. There's a push button on the back side. Push on this button and pull straight up. That's one. There's one more right next to it. Using a 10mm socket, remove the 5 bolts for the valve cover. There's 2 more on the back side, on the bottom. Remove all the bolts. Using a 10mm socket, we're going to remove the bracket for the engine harness. You don't have to do this. I just think it's going to give us much more room to get this cover out and a little bit less of a fight. Lift the engine harness up. Pull the valve cover out. And then we'll get to cleaning. Remove the valve cover gasket out of the valve cover. Using a seal puller or a flat blade screwdriver, we're going to remove the tube seals. And then do the same for the rest of the seals. Using a clean rag and some parts cleaner, we'll spray our rag, and we're going to clean the inside of this valve cover. We're just going to get any of the big gunk off. You can get it as clean as you want. We're just going to get the big stuff. You can also clean the outside of the cover while it's off. It's not required, but it's nice. Using a razor blade or a light abrasive, we're going to clean the mating surface for the valve cover. If you're using a razor blade while doing this, make sure you do not mar the mating surface at all. You don't want any gouges, scratches, or anything like that. And go around and clean the whole valve cover until it looks something like this. Using a clean rag and some parts cleaner, we're going to spray our rag. And we're going to go around the valve cover and wipe down the outside and get any oil or dirt that's left off of the mating surface. And go around and do this for the whole valve cover. Install the valve cover gasket into the valve cover. We're going to install the tube seals. Seat these nice and square. I'm going to use a 1 3/16 socket. For me, this fits perfectly around the seal. And then we're going to tap it into place. Get the seal to sit nice and flush. And then do the same for the next 2 seals. We're going to install new washer seals onto our valve cover bolts. You should be able to pop these rubber pieces over the end of this bolt. Mine are very crusty and kind of feel like plastic. So I'm going to cut mine off. Remove the outer washer. I'm going to take a bit of parts cleaner on a rag and I'm going to clean this bolt. You don't have to do this. Grab the new washer seal, push it onto the bolt, and repeat that process for all 5 bolts. With all our gaskets and seals installed, we're ready to install the cover onto the car. Install the valve cover into the vehicle. Push the tube seals on, then go around and make sure that the gasket is still sitting in the valve cover properly, which ours is. And we'll go around and start to install our bolts. With all the bolts started by hand, go around and snug them down. We don't want to put a lot of pressure on them this first time, we just kind of want to snug them to the cover. To torque the valve cover, it's a 3-step process. Our first step was getting the bolts tight to the cover. Now we'll go around and put them all at 6 foot-pounds. And then we'll go around one last time for our final step and put them at 8.8 foot-pounds. Since it's a rubber gasket, we're going to go around tightening these staggeredly. That was 6 foot-pounds, now we'll move on to 8.8 foot-pounds. And I'll go around one more time just to double check. Install the coils. Install the bolts for the coils. Snug the bolts down. Install the connectors for the coils. Install the bracket for the engine harness. Snug the bolt down. Install the engine harness onto the bracket. Install the bolt for the power steering line bracket. Snug it down. Install the bolt for the engine harness stay. And snug it down. We'll have one more on the other side. Install the second bolt for the engine harness and snug it down. Install the two connectors on the back side of the motor. Install the plastic green harness stay onto the bracket. Install the hose. Pinch the clamp, return it to its original position. Install the injector connectors. Install the plastic stay into the bracket. Using a light abrasive or a razor blade, go through and clean the mating surface on the bottom of the intake manifold. When you're done cleaning, flip it over and clean the top half as well, using the same procedure. When you're cleaning, try not to push any debris into these ports. Try to scrape everything off of the side. If you'd like, you can stuff rags into these ports so you can make sure nothing gets in. Using brake parts cleaner and a clean rag, we're going to wipe our mating surface and get any dust, oil, or anything else off of it. With that nice and clean, we can drop the intake manifold onto the car. Install the nuts onto the studs. Get all the bolts started by hand. Go around and snug all of the nuts and bolts down until they touch the cover. We're going to torque the intake manifold in 3 steps. The first step is getting the bolts to touch the cover. The second step will be 8 foot-pounds, and the final step will be 16 foot-pounds. Follow as I go. There is a sequence. Going in the same order, torque the bolts to 16 foot-pounds for our final pass. We're going to clean our last piece. We're going to go around and clean the mating surface around this top cover using a razor blade or a light abrasive. Using a clean rag and some parts cleaner, we're going to clean this mating surface. Just wipe away any dust, dirt, or oil. We're going to wipe our mating surface on the top of our intake manifold one more time just to get rid of any dust, dirt, or oil. You can use some parts cleaner. Install the gasket and install the cover. Get all the bolts started by hand. Snug down all the bolts until they touch the cover, but don't make them tight. With all of the bolts touching the cover, we're going to go around and torque them to 4 foot-pounds, and then in our final step, we'll torque them to 8.8 foot-pounds. Now in our final step, bring all the bolts to 8.8 foot-pounds. Install the throttle body. Get the nuts started. Snug all the bolts down. Torque the throttle body bolts to 16 foot-pounds. Go in a cross pattern. Install the connector. Push until you hear a click. If you don't hear a click, give it a pull. Make sure it's locked on. And we'll put the vacuum hose on the bottom. Grab a pair of pliers, pinch the clamp, and slide it back into place. Install the connector. Install the vacuum hose onto the back of the intake manifold. Pinch the clamp, slide it back to its original position. Install the vacuum hose onto the side of the intake manifold. Pinch the clamp, put it back into its original position. Install the intake onto the throttle body. Install the hose assembly. Snug down the clamps. Tighten the bolts for the air box. Install the engine cover. Install the negative battery cable. Tighten the terminal down. And you're good to go.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.